All right, so it is now approaching the noon hour in New York on this Monday, February 23rd, 2026, and the global financial system has just moved from a state of critical failure to a total systemic blackout that the interbank lending markets can no longer recover from. While the early morning headlines were calling this a temporary glitch in the digital clearing systems, the real-time data streaming into the JON CC archive from the primary data centers in London and Frankfurt confirms that the SWIFT network has officially entered a state of terminal paralysis. My hands are actually trembling as I look at the settlement logs because they prove that the pending status on millions of bank transfers across the G7 nations is not a delay, but a permanent sequestration of private capital to cover the $30 trillion insolvency of the central banking cartel. We have officially hit the 0 hour where the digital abstraction of wealth has finally collided with the physical reality of empty vaults, and in the next few minutes, I am going to expose the hidden emergency protocols that were just activated by the Federal Reserve to prevent a total mass exit from the dollar-based grid. The gap between the paper-silver price and the actual cost of physical delivery in the East has just hit a vertical wall, with the Shanghai Gold Exchange now quoting prices nearly $20 higher than the frozen tickers in London and New York. We are witnessing a historic market decapitation, where the Western exchanges have effectively lost the ability to settle their obligations in anything other than worthless digital tokens that no longer have purchasing power in the international commodity markets. This is the great disconnect that John AG warned was coming, but the speed of today's collapse has caught even the most senior analysts by surprise, as the physical metal is being diverted directly into the private ledgers of the sovereign BRICS nations. The vaults in London are being audited under total military guard to prevent the public from seeing that the registered inventory has been completely siphoned out during the weekend blackout. If you're not watching the internal warehouse receipts from the comics right now, you are essentially a ghost in a machine that has already been switched off by the system controllers. The midday trading session has opened with a catastrophic collapse of the shadow banking collateral as the smart money realizes that the U.S. Treasury market is no longer functioning as a reliable source of liquidity. We have seen total vault outflows accelerate by over 15% in the last 4 hours alone, a rate of physical drain that has triggered a condition red alert across every major bullion bank in the Western Hemisphere. There are currently over 50,000 silver contracts demanding immediate physical delivery that the COMEX has no way of satisfying, leading to secret force majeure negotiations behind closed doors to pay off large institutional holders in cash just to keep the lights on for one more hour. The global market is no longer a place of price discovery. It is a crime scene where the evidence of the greatest wealth heist in history is being scrubbed by high-frequency AI bots. If you are still holding paper receipts for assets you do not physically control, you are holding a claim on a bankruptcy that has already been finalized by the elite. The macro context has shifted violently into a hyperinflationary feedback loop this afternoon as the latest emergency inflation prints confirm that the purchasing power of the Western currencies is being evaporated at a rate of 5% per day. This is the definition of a currency death spiral, where the central banks are trapped between a total debt default and the immediate destruction of the middle class through the total loss of purchasing power. The masses are beginning to realize that their savings are being used as the final layer of fuel for the sovereign debt fire, and the rush for the few remaining exits into hard assets has turned into a global stampede. You can verify these numbers through the internal interbank lending rates if you have access to the primary terminal data. The math is undeniable, but the mainstream media is being legally gagged to prevent a total social explosion. JON CC is archiving these final movements of the paper era because the synergy between the current banking holiday and the physical metal shortage is the textbook for the final reset of the global financial ledger. Geopolitics has officially reached the point of total fragmentation this Monday as the BRICS nations have blocked all Western access to their new gold-backed Kazan ledger, effectively cutting the US dollar out of 60% of global trade in a single stroke. We are seeing record-breaking physical silver and gold shipments being moved via military transport toward the east, effectively stripping the Western vaults of their last remaining liquid reserves in a coordinated economic strike. This is not a trade dispute. It is the final phase of a financial war where the weapon of choice is the control of the physical world versus the digital illusion. The United States has attempted to respond by freezing foreign assets, but you cannot use a digital freeze to stop a physical drain when you no longer have the metal to back your threats. The fragmentation of the global market is now complete, and the breakout of silver today is the alarm bell signaling that the paper trap has been permanently closed for everyone who stayed inside the traditional banking system. An unusual options position has just been identified in the dark pools that suggests the system controllers are preparing for a total transparency event where the digital records of private bank accounts will be wiped clean by a simulated cyber attack, We are seeing massive volume and deep out-of-the-money puts on the entire Western banking sector, indicating that the people who run the system are betting on its total destruction within the next 48 hours. While the retail public is being told to trust the system, the scale of these positions occurring just as the interbank lending markets have frozen solid is the final signal that the global elite have completed their exit into the analog world. This is not a theory. It is a data point sitting in the encrypted settlement layers for anyone who knows how to decode the signals of the banking cartel. In a world of digital deepfakes, these large-scale tail risk bets are the only honest indicators of where the system architects expect the world to be by the time the opening bell rings tomorrow morning. The honest bearish case must be stated because intellectual honesty is the only thing that separates a real archive from a channel that follows the fear of the masses. If the central banks manage to implement a total digital martial law tonight, they might be able to temporarily freeze the prices of gold and silver through a total suspension of all trading activity. Furthermore, if a sudden military intervention occurs in the key energy corridors, the geopolitical risk could be used as an excuse to seize all private holdings of precious metals for national security purposes. However, none of these short-term state actions change the fact that the world is currently running a structural deficit in real money that has been building for 6 consecutive years. You can use a law to stop a trade, but you cannot use a law to fill an empty vault. The JON CC data proves that the physical floor of the global economy is now higher than the state can afford to ignore. Silver has finally shattered the $90 psychological barrier in the OTC markets this afternoon, creating a massive vacuum that is sucking the remaining liquidity out of the stock and bond markets as investors scramble for the only asset that still has physical integrity. This base-building process has ended, and the vertical phase of the global repricing event has officially begun, leaving the high-frequency trading bots in a state of total confusion as they attempt to sell paper metal that does not exist. That level is the new line in the sand for the global market structure, and as long as the Eastern exchanges remain open, the momentum remains firmly with the physical bulls who are demanding their ounces at any price. The next major resistance levels are now in the triple digits, a scenario that the mainstream media called a conspiracy theory only 12 hours ago, yet the depth of the current shortage suggests that the move will be finalized before the sun sets on the west today. You must remain disciplined and focus on the physical delivery failures rather than the pre-recorded loops being shown on the financial news networks. The interbank settlement average is now acting as a ceiling for the digital dollar, and every time the interbank rate tries to normalize, it is met with a wave of default notices from the primary bullion banks. The question for the coming evening session is straightforward. Will the G7 governments be forced to declare a total banking holiday before the day is over, or will they allow the ATMs to run completely dry and risk a total societal breakdown? The supply-demand setup for the global financial system is genuinely broken, and the only way to rebalance the ledger is through a significantly lower standard of living for the West and a return to a physical asset standard that takes years to rebuild. JON CC is tracking the interbank liquidity ratios because that is the live variable that will tell the real story before the final market freeze and the permanent lock on your banking access. When the paper-to-physical ratio finally snaps, the wealth of the world will move from the creditors to the asset owners in a matter of seconds. The Shanghai Gold Exchange is now the only functioning price discovery mechanism left in the world for physical assets because it is the only exchange that requires the metal to be in the vault before a trade can be executed. The fact that the East is consistently paying 20% more for silver than the paper quotes in New York proves that the seesaw has finally broken, and the arbitrage is now working to liquidate the Western banking system from the inside out. When the American public realizes that the NYSE price is a rigged simulation, they will find that the local coin shops have already been cleared out by the same banks that are telling them to stay calm. This is why the JON CC mission is so critical. We provide the data in the quiet moments so that you can act before the Monday meltdown becomes the permanent reality of the new digital feudalism. Reclaiming your sovereignty starts with owning assets that have no digital delete button and no government counterparty. The high probability of a total internet blackout in the financial zones is now the primary driver of the global risk models, creating a synchronized convergence of risk that the Western world is completely unprepared for. As the interbank communication channels continue to degrade, the natural floor for physical assets increases, creating a wall that the AI trading bots and the state-controlled news networks cannot break. We are witnessing the end of the era of digital convenience and the birth of a physical reality, where the control of resources defines the power and sovereignty of every man and woman on the planet. JON CC is the only archive cross-referencing this data across multiple layers of the global grid, showing you the map of the sovereign future while the mainstream media is still reading from the script of a dead empire. The time for speculation is over. The time for verifiable physical reality has arrived for those who have the eyes to see the heist in progress. The change in total interbank liquidity across all major global exchanges shows a negative trend that is mathematically terminal for a digital economy that relies on constant debt expansion. Silver is the primary industrial insurance for the high technology and green energy sectors, and as the cyber pandemic narratives accelerate, the demand for physical backup systems is gapping higher than at any point in history. The price suppression of the last decade has left the West with no strategic reserves, leading to a structural bankruptcy that cannot be fixed by printing more paper or adjusting the digital interest rates on a central bank computer. The ones who check the interbank settlement reports do not need a financial advisor to tell them the system is failing. They can see the bankruptcy in the pending status of their own transactions. Protecting your history requires an understanding that we are moving from a world of infinite paper to a world of finite physical truth. The psychological warfare of the current hour is designed to keep you in a state of analysis paralysis, while the global elite quietly move the world's remaining gold and silver into their own private analog archives. They want you to believe that the current system errors are just technical issues, while they are using the cover of the glitch to finalize the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the human species. By the time the new global ledger is officially announced, the average citizen will be trapped in a digital identity system with no physical assets to trade for their survival. This is why the JON CC archive is providing the evidence of the great confiscation in real time, offering the strategic blueprint for the sovereign individual to survive the opening day of the reset. Sovereignty is not a gift from the state. It is the physical possession of your own value and your own data outside of their digital panopticon. The return of global physical demand to the silver market is the final test for the Western banking cartel's ability to maintain the illusion of a functioning dollar system. If the current gap between Shanghai and New York does not close within the next few hours, it will trigger a chain reaction of defaults that will leave the bullion banks and the paper exchanges in a state of total liquidation. The banks are currently using every tool in their arsenal, from artificial internet outages to high-frequency spoofing, to prevent this outcome, but they are fighting against the laws of mathematics. You cannot satisfy a physical requirement with a digital lie, and the coming break will be a total reset that moves wealth from the paper holders to the asset owners. This is the moment of truth that defines the next 100 years of human history, and the data shows that the clock has already hit zero. Stay sovereign, stay informed, and stay physical, because in the archives of history, the only currency that survives the fires of a system reset is the one you can hold in your hand and defend with your integrity. The global market is resetting into the shadows, the digital mask has officially slipped, and the physical truth is finally taking its throne in the vaults of the East and the hands of the sovereign. We will see you on the other side of this Monday meltdown, where the reality of the vaults defines the wealth of nations and the freedom of the individuals who saw the data before the lights went out. This is JON CC, and this is the strategic archive of the final days of the digital financial illusion. Thank you for watching, and remember to always verify the settlement logs before you trust the numbers on your screen, because in the age of the reset, only the physical is real.